Nicolas, we are so honoured to have you here in Australia.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I'm really spoiled to be here. I love this country and it's been just so much fun.
I know because I've had a sneak preview of the presentation you're going to do around Australia. I know that you're going to explain to us, in great detail about the different types of lavender and about the population lavender, so we won't go into that now. I do have a question for you because Noel and I, when we spent time with your dad, that would have been 11 or 12 years ago, your dad really got us passionate about helichrysum. We learnt many things from him. We actually had the chance to go out in France and start collecting helichrysum, and we were so excited. We got this whole laundry basket full of helichrysum flowers. It had taken us 2 hours to collect it. We'd been climbing up the rocky slopes around the castle at Simeon, and we were so proud of ourselves. And I think for all that we collected, I don't even know if he got 1 mil of oil from our hard work. We felt like we put our lives at risk for this. So we're really excited to hear that Gary's got a farm now growing helichrysum in Croatia. I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that because I know that doesn't overlap with your presentation on the lavender. So over to you.
Sure, I love helichrysum also. Sorry, what was that?
What would you like to share with us about that?
So helichrysum. So first of all, I find it very interesting that my father went to send you to cut some helichrysum around Simeon, because the variety we have there isn't Italicum. So it actually isn't a good variety to use for aromatherapy.
Well, I can actually say he was testing it at the time. So what he wanted us to do by collecting the helichrysum, he was then testing it to see if maybe it might be similar or good in the way of the really great helichrysum, but obviously he discovered that the one growing in that area wasn't the same.
Yeah, so helichrysum is a plant that's very similar to lavender. It's not exactly the same family, but we can call it a cousin. That's how we actually are able to help Croatia a lot on the French farm, and giving them tips on how to planting, on how to distill, on how to cut, because it's so similar. Now in France, we have wild helichrysum all around the farm. You can actually see a lot of it, but as we were saying, it's not the correct variety. You do have a correct variety that's in Corsica, which is an island just below France, but the other perfect variety is in Corsica, where Gary just started his new farm. In Croatia, sorry. Croatia, yeah. Yes, in Croatia, where Gary started his new farm. Helichrysum, like lavender, is a plant that we usually grow for about 10 years. It has, different than lavender, it has a really small yield. In comparison, so you understand a little, if we have 7 tons of lavender plant, if we cut it from 7 tons of plant from a field, we can get from 20 to 30 kilos of essential oil. And it's not perfectly correct for the helichrysum, but it's about, for 7 tons we get about 5 kilos. So the yield is about 5 to 6 times less than lavender, knowing that true lavender actually has already a small yield. In comparison, for the same amount, 7 tons of plant, lavandine, we can go up to 150 to 200 kilos.
Wow.
So that would be a big yield, and compared to that, helichrysum is at 5 kilos. So it is a lot of plant material for just a little bit of oil.
Well, that helps to explain
why. Grow helichrysum 10 years.
I was going to say that helps to explain why it's a more expensive oil as well.
Oh yes, and at the time in Croatia, it was also all wild cut, meaning that somebody that owned a distillery would pay cutters to go and cut helichrysum in the wild, and he would pay them by the kilo, by the amount of plant he would bring back. When their helichrysum started being known to the world, everybody started to want some, and that put a pressure on the market. And those cutters, since they were paid by the kilo, started cutting wood. By cutting wood, you destroy the plant. It doesn't grow again, because by cutting wood also they have more in their bag and they're paid more. And so the wild crops were starting to disappear, and people were cutting more and more. And so when Gary decided to create a farm in Croatia, it's not only to secure the helichrysum for young living, but it's also because he saw all those plants disappearing in the wild, and he said, we need to stop this. We need to start saving that plant, and the only way to do it is to have our own farm. And obviously, so we helped all we could in France because we were close by, and like as I was saying, it's very similar. But Gary took the opportunity of growing his own helichrysum into doing a lot of research into what kind of soil it likes. Helichrysum is a plant that likes very poor soil. But when I mean very poor soil, lavender likes very poor soil, but helichrysum can grow from a little hole in a rock with just about a fingernail of earth, and that can make a huge helichrysum plant. It can do that, but it likes to do that also, meaning that if you put helichrysum in an open field with no rocks, it won't be happy. It really likes those rocks. And so Gary started looking into it, looking into rock crushers and what size rocks would work best. And so I go there from time to time, and I'm always interested in learning the new discoveries he's made on helichrysum.
I know when I was there, Noel and I went over to the Croatian farm for the diamond retreat last year, and Gary was showing us his stone crusher, and he was showing us how he was, we could see some fields that had larger stones and some had the stones broken up more. Could you just explain what the purpose of that was?
Well, that's part of his research. He wanted to see, because at first they didn't crush the rocks much. In Croatia, you have very huge rocks all around. And so when they started, they had to crush the rocks to be able to plant and come in. So they didn't crush too much at first, thinking that helichrysum likes rocks, so maybe they shouldn't. But they found that the plants didn't grow as much as it should, and it was also very difficult to come in the field with a tractor when you had so huge rocks. And so they started crushing more and more and looking on how the plants were growing. Now, if you go to Croatia nowadays, you can actually see 5 types of fields with the rocks being at different size and how the plants grow. You have fields where the rocks are so small, but a huge amount, but are really broken up to tiny pieces, and the plants are huge compared to the first field where the rocks were very big. Even though there's a year difference in when those 2 fields were planted, the field with the small rocks, the plants are already much bigger because they're growing at a much faster rate. And so that's always part of what Gary does, is when he comes in and makes a farm, it's to have a secure quantity, of course, of essential oil, but he also wants to understand the plant and do as much research and tests on it to really know how to grow it the best, how to cut it, and how to distill it the best way.
That's one of the things that I've always admired about Gary, is the lengths he goes to. He seems so intuitive with the way that he works with plants, and some of the things that he tries and experiments with, I think, are quite out of the box. So that's really exciting to hear, that the actual rock size in the soil makes a difference to how happy the plant is, how fast it grows, how big it grows. That's wonderful, Nicolas. Look, the other thing that I'm really interested in is you mentioned that the figures of what the yield was for lavender versus helichrysum, so that we could see that helichrysum was a much lower yield. I think you were talking about 7 ton of plant matter. And so I have 2 questions. How much would that equate to in acreage to produce the 20 or 25 litres of lavender oil? And also, you've got cookers that are, if you could just remind me what size they are, how much goes into a cooker?
So we have cookers that are 24 meter cube. We're in meter cube. That's how we decide the cooker. And I say 7 tons specifically because that's 1 hectare of lavender field for us. So that's why I can compare. And since helichrysum is very similar, we can usually, actually it's a little less, but we can usually get about that same amount of plant from the field. So it's a good comparison, because that a hectare of lavender will give you from 25 to 30 kilos of oil, and a hectare of helichrysum will give you about 5 kilos of oil.
Wow, and as you said, if you can equate that to lavandin, a hectare of lavandin would then give you 150 kilograms of oil?
Well, actually a hectare of lavandin, the plant grows so much bigger for lavandin, then you actually have more plant matter. So a hectare will give you, yes, 150 kilos, but because you'll have so much, you'll have, I think, about 9 tons of plant in a hectare of lavandin.
Okay.
So you get 2 tons plant more in a hectare because they grow so big.
And I know, and this may be overlapping with your presentation, so tell me if it is. I know that there's a lot of so-called lavender on the market that is actually lavandin. So I guess for me, when I hear those sorts of figures, I can understand that lavandin is so cheap to produce that it allows companies, if they can pass it off as lavender oil, it gives them a much greater profit margin than, say, a company like Young Living that's producing true Lavandula frustifolia.
Of course, there's that. That's why most people do it. Is lavandin is so cheap compared to lavender to produce, then everybody wants to try and sell lavandin as lavender, and that's one of the things we're always making sure. That's why we always want you to check the Latin name, and that's why you have that on your label. But it's not always the case. Some people actually go all the way of saying lavender oil and putting the Latin name. So during my presentation, I'm going to really explain the difference between lavender and lavandin, not only in the shape of the plant so you can see it, but also in the smell. I'm going to try and show you and explain to you the best way to differentiate, and so you know and understand when you smell the essential oil you have, the Young Living oil, the lavender oil, how good it is compared to what you can find on other markets. And that's part of my presentation is for you to really understand what's out there and why the product you have is so good.
So you're going to teach us to use our own noses?
I'm going to try, knowing that I'm still learning myself. I think I will never stop trying to learn how to use my nose.
Look, this question I know I have asked you previously, but I'd love to just ask it again. When we're talking about using noses, I've often heard that Gary is one of these people that has this amazing nose. And I know in France, you've got, within the perfume industry, you've got people that are called a nose. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Yes, of course. A nose is in the perfume industry is someone that'll create the perfume. It's actually a job that takes many years to learn to do. You actually have to have a skill at first, and you have to train your nose in remembering each and every smell. So every day you have to practice smelling different things and really remembering it and using your memory and your nose together, working as one. And once they've become good enough, they actually are able to by smelling something, knowing what's inside, decomposing it or recompose, and that's the people that actually make perfumes nowadays. Now, Gary's a little bit like that, except he's thought himself not to detect what's in a perfume, but he's actually able to detect when a lavender was cut too early or too late, or some different components in a essential oil. He actually is able to notice that, and that amazed me. And I've always tried to learn that myself, and I'm always trying to, because it means that he's able to go in a field and just by smell, feel and notice if the field should be cut or if we have to wait a little more. And so it's just an advantage. I'm always impressed by that.
So what you mean is he can actually walk through a lavender field and crush some of the flowers, because the oil comes from the flowers. He can crush some of the flowers in his hands and just smell it, and from that he gets a sense of the constituents in the oil.
He really gets an idea, because that's something I'll explain also. When we cut lavender, if we wait too long, the essential oil is different. If we cut too early, the essential oil is different. And so those components in the essential oil differ, and Gary can smell that. If there's a component that there's too much a present of, it means that the lavender is not ready to cut. And so I'll explain more of that, but yes, he's able to detect that. And even when I hand him a little sample of our lavender, he'll say, oh, this is a very good oil this year, you should cut a little earlier next year. Or he'll always have that even not even just walking in a field, a distilled essential oil, he knows when we cut the field. So it's very interesting for me to see a skill like that. And so Gary is a nose also, because he's able to do that.
Yeah, and I know that he's put that to great use when he's gone into places like, Ecuador and the Amazon forest, because he's walked around and just would, crush different aromatic plants and just smell the oil that was in them. And he would often know just from that aroma whether that oil was something that he wanted to take further and maybe, gather some of the plant matter and test it and actually do a proper analysis of it. So.
Yeah, he's discovered many plants like Dorado Azul. He's actually named it by walking in the Amazonian forest and smelling it. So, yeah, that's something. That's his nose. That's his capacity. It's incredible.
Well, Nicolas, I'm so grateful for the time that you've taken tonight with us. Thank you very much. And as everyone that's listening in, Nicolas begins his tour this Friday night in Cairns. If you go to Young Living's website, www.youngliving.com.au, right on the homepage you're going to see the Leap in Lavender tour with Nicolas Landel. So just simply click on that, and that takes you to the registration page, or actually it takes you to this page that you're looking at on your computer. And you'll see as we scroll down, so Cairns is the 15th, Friday the 15th. Brisbane, Saturday afternoon, the 16th. Sydney, Sunday afternoon. Tuesday in Hobart, Wednesday in Melbourne, Thursday in Adelaide, and Friday in Perth. So $25 to attend. Please let your team know you've had a chance now to hear Nicolas, and I hope that you're as impressed as I am with his beautiful knowledge and his wonderful way of communicating. It's such a pleasure always for me to learn from Nicolas. So let's make this the most fantastic tour that Young Living's done. Nicolas, thank you. It's a very long flight for you to come down under, and we're so honoured that you've made that trip for us.